Welcome to another gentle voyage into the past, where the quiet whispers of history unfold like waves against a distant shore. This is History Orbit, a place where the stories of long-ago lives settle softly around you, inviting you to relax, to breathe deeply, and to let your mind drift. Tonight, we sail into the medieval seas, where the air is thick with salt and mystery, and the horizon hides tales of ships lost to time. Picture yourself nestled in the comfort of your bed, the modern world fading as the creak of wooden timbers and the sigh of the wind draw you into a world of sailors, storms, and spectral legends. These are the ghost ships of the Middle Ages, vessels adrift in fog, their crews silent, their stories woven into the fabric of the sea. Imagine standing on a rocky cliff, the cold spray of the ocean misting your face. Before you stretches the grey expanse of the sea, vast and unyielding. In the distance, a shadow moves a ship, its sails limp and tattered, gliding without sound. No lantern glows, no voice calls out. It is a ghost ship, a relic of a voyage gone wrong, or perhaps something stranger. Tonight, we'll explore what it was like to live aboard such a ship, to endure the relentless rhythm of the sea. We'll follow the chilling tale of one cursed vessel, delve into the ancient myths that birthed the Flying Dutchman, and reflect on the stark divide between those who commanded and those who toiled, even in death. Let the words carry you like a gentle tide, and if you drift to sleep, let the sea hold you softly. For now, imagine yourself stepping aboard a medieval merchant ship where every day was a test of endurance, and the sea was both home and adversary. Close your eyes and imagine waking in the dim, cramped hold of a medieval merchant ship. The air is heavy, thick with the scent of damp wood, tar, and something faintly sour, perhaps the barrels of pickled herring stacked against the hull. The planks beneath you are cold and slick, and as the ship sways, you feel the motion in your stomach, a constant reminder of the sea's power. Your blanket, a coarse square of wool, is damp from the spray that seeps through the deck above, and it does little to warm you. Around you, the snores and murmurs of other sailors fill the space, their bodies pressed close in the narrow hold. Somewhere nearby, a goat bleats, its hoof scraping against a wooden crate. Chickens cluck softly, tethered in a corner. The ship is a living thing, but not a comforting one. It's a world of wood and water where every creak and groan reminds you of your fragility. The ship itself is a merchant cork, a stout vessel built for trade across the North Sea or the Baltic. Its hull is broad, its timbers hewn from oak and sealed with pitch to keep the water at bay. A single mast rises from the deck, supporting a heavy square sail that catches the wind when it deigns to blow. The deck is cluttered with coils of rope, barrels of cargo, and the tools of survival: buckets, axes, a rusted iron pot for cooking. The ship is sturdy, but it feels alive in a way that unsettles you. Every wave sends a shudder through the timbers, and the hull groans as if protesting its burden. You shift on the hard floor, trying to find a spot where the wood doesn't dig into your back. But comfort is a luxury you left on shore. You rise before dawn, though the darkness below deck makes time irrelevant. The only clock is the rhythm of the ship, the lap of waves, the creak of ropes, the shouted orders from above. You climb a narrow ladder to the deck, your hands gripping the slick rungs. The air grows sharper as you ascend, carrying the sting of salt and the faint metallic tang of rusted iron. Emerging onto the deck, you're met by a grey sky that stretches endlessly, unbroken by land or star. The wind bites at your face, and you pull your cloak tighter, though the wool is stiff with salt and offers little warmth. Your boots, patched and worn, slip on the wet planks, and you steady yourself against a barrel, its wood rough under your fingers. Your first task is the bilge pump, a grim necessity that keeps the ship afloat. Water seeps into the hold constantly, pooling in the ship's lowest depths where it mixes with debris and decay. You take your place at the pump, a crude wooden device that groans with every heave. Your arms ache as you work, the motion repetitive and relentless. The water you draw up is dark, foul with silt and flecked with things you try not to identify. Rats dart past, their claws scratching against the wood. They're as much a part of the ship as you are, gnawing at the sacks of grain and hardtack, leaving their droppings in every corner. You've learned to ignore them, just as you. Thee learn to ignore the lice that crawl through your hair and the fleas that burrow into your clothes. The ship is a world of its own, and you are merely one of its weary inhabitants. Food is a constant concern. Breakfast is a piece of hardtack, a dense biscuit of flour and water, baked until it's hard as stone. You tap it against a barrel to dislodge the weevils, though some remain, wriggling in the cracks. You chew slowly, your jaw aching, and wash it down with a sip of water from a cask. The water is brackish, tasting of algae and wood, and you ration it carefully. Supplies are limited, and the next port is weeks away if you reach it at all. On rare days, there might be a strip of dried fish or a scrap of salted pork, but these are reserved for the captain and his officers. You make do with what you have, and you try not to dwell on the hunger that gnaws at your insides, a quiet but persistent companion. The work is unending. After the bilge pump, you're sent to scrub the deck, a futile task against the constant spray of the sea. The planks are slick with salt and grime, and your brush little more than a bundle of twigs does little to clean them. You kneel, your knees aching against the hard wood, and scrub until your hands are raw. Then you're called to the ropes, heavy and sodden, to adjust the sail. The hemp burns your palms, leaving blisters that sting with every pull. If the wind fails, you might be sent to the oars, where you sit shoulder to shoulder with other sailors, pulling in time to a drum's steady beat. The air in the rowing hold is thick, heavy with sweat and exhaustion, and the oars are unforgiving. Their weight a constant strain on your shoulders. You move with the ship's rhythm, but every stroke is a reminder of your limits. The sea is both your world and your adversary. On rare clear nights, the stars emerge, their light sharp and cold against the black sky. The navigator, a weathered man with eyes like chipped flint, uses them to chart the course, his hands steady as he consults a crude astrolabe. He mutters prayers to St. Nicholas, patron of sailors, and you join him silently, hoping for safe passage. But the stars are unreliable. A single night of cloud cover can leave you lost, drifting in the vastness of the ocean. You've heard tales of ships that vanished, carried off by currents or swallowed by storms. Some say they sail forever, their crews doomed to wander the seas. At night, when the wind howls and the ship creaks, you hear sounds that don't belong, faint footsteps, a distant cry, a whisper from the fog. The older sailors dismiss them as tricks of the sea, but you're not so sure. Disease is a shadow that follows you. Scurvy creeps in after weeks at sea, your gums swelling, your teeth loosening. You've seen men weaken, their skin turning sallow, their eyes dull. The ship's surgeon, if you can call him that, is little help. His tools are rusted, his remedies limited to bleeding or prayer. A cut on your hand, earned from a splintered oar, festers quickly in the damp, and you wrap it in a strip of cloth, hoping it heals. Infection is a constant threat, and you've seen men succumb to fever or dysentery, their bodies wasting away until they can no longer rise. When a man dies, his body is wrapped in canvas and cast into the sea, a brief prayer spoken before the work resumes. The sea takes him as it takes everything, and you turn back to your tasks, the rhythm of the ship pulling you forward. Pirates are another fear, always lurking at the edge of thought. Their ships are lean and fast, crewed by men who know no mercy. You've heard stories of entire crews slaughtered, their cargo stolen, their ship set ablaze. The captain keeps a chest of weapon, swords, axes, a few crossbows, but you know they're no match for a determined raid. You scan the horizon daily, your heart sinking at the sight of any sail. Even friendly ships can turn foe, their crews tempted by the promise of your cargo wool, wine, spices, or grain. Trust is a rare thing, and you learn to keep your eyes sharp and your hands ready. The isolation is perhaps the hardest part. Days blur into weeks, the grey sea unchanging, the faces around you growing gaunt and silent. Conversation fades as the journey wears on, replaced by the rhythm of the ship, the creak of the hull, the slap of waves, the hum of the wind. You try to recall the warmth of a fire, the taste of fresh bread, but the sea erases such memories. At night, you lie awake, listening to the ship's sounds and the sea beyond. Sometimes you hear other things faint, unplaceable, like a voice calling from the mist or the creak of wood that seems to come from nowhere. The older sailors warn you not to speak of them. The sea keeps its secrets, they say, and you learn to hold your tongue. Life on a medieval merchant ship is a constant struggle, a battle against the sea, the ship, and your own body. Every task is a reminder of your place in this unforgiving world. You haul, you scrub, you row, you pray. You endure because you must, because the alternative is the cold embrace of the sea. And yet, there's a rhythm to it all, a steady cadence that seeps into your bones. Imagine yourself there, swaying with the ship, the world reduced to wood and water, the horizon both a promise and a threat. Let that rhythm carry you now as we linger a moment longer in this harsh, relentless world, where every day tests your strength and the sea whispers secrets you may never understand. As you settle deeper into the rhythm of the medieval merchant ship, the world around you feels both endless and confined. The sea stretches to the horizon, grey and unyielding, while the ship itself a creaking wooden cage holds you fast. The air is thick with the scent of salt and damp rope, and the constant motion of the waves rocks you, a reminder that you are at the mercy of forces far greater than yourself. Imagine yourself standing on the deck, your hands raw from hauling ropes, your eyes scanning the empty expanse for a glimpse of land that never comes. The life of a sailor in the Middle Ages is one of endurance, where every task, every moment, is a quiet battle against the sea's indifference. Let this rhythm carry you as we delve deeper into the daily struggles, the fleeting moments of hope, and the eerie whispers that haunt the edges of your thoughts. The work aboard the ship never truly pauses. After hours at the bilge pump or scrubbing the deck, you're called to repair a sail. Its heavy canvas torn by a recent gust. You climb the rigging, your fingers clinging to the coarse ropes, your boots slipping on the slick mast. The wind whips at your face, cold and sharp, and the ship sways beneath you, making every step a test of balance. High above the deck, you feel the vastness of the sea, its waves glinting like polished steel under the dim sun. You thread a bone needle through the sail, your hands trembling from cold and fatigue, and stitch the tear closed, knowing another storm could rip it open again. The task is repetitive, almost meditative, and yet it demands your full attention. One misstep, and you could fall to the deck below, or worse, into the sea. Below deck, the hold is a world of shadows and smells. The cargo barrels of wine, bales of wool, sacks of grain takes up most of the space, leaving little room for the crew. You navigate narrow paths between crates, your shoulders brushing against damp wood. The air is heavy, thick with the musty scent of wool and the sharp tang of vinegar from leaking barrels. Livestock, tethered in makeshift pens, add to the chaos. A cow lows mournfully, its breath steaming in the cold air, while chickens flutter in their cages, scattering feathers that stick to your boots. You check the cargo, ensuring the ropes securing it haven't loosened, for a shifting load could unbalance the ship. Every task, no matter how small, is a matter of survival, and you learn to move with care, your body attuned to the ship's constant sway. Food remains a daily struggle. The hardtack you ate this morning sits heavy in your stomach, its texture like gravel, its taste bland and faintly sour. You've learned to soak it in water to soften it, though that only makes the weevils more noticeable, their tiny bodies floating in the murky liquid. On rare days, you might be given a sliver of cheese, its surface speckled with mold, but still a treasure compared to the endless hardtack. The captain and his officers fare better, their meals served on pewter plates in the small cabin at the stern. You've caught glimpses of their table-dried fruits, salted meat, even a jug of wine while you make do with your rations. The inequality stings, but you swallow it just as you swallow the bitter water from the cask. Hunger is a constant companion, and you learn to live with its quiet ache, focusing instead on the work that keeps you moving. Water is another trial. The casks stored in the hold are coated in green slime, and the water within tastes of wood and stagnation. You ration it carefully, knowing that a delay in reaching port could mean running dry. On long voyages, the crew sometimes resorts to collecting rainwater, spreading the sail to catch it during storms. But storms are as much a threat as a blessing. The rain comes with howling winds and waves that crash over the deck, soaking you to the bone. You've seen men swept overboard, their cries lost in the roar of the sea. and you cling to the rigging during storms, your heart pounding as the ship lurches. The water you collect is precious, but it's often tainted with salt, leaving your throat raw and your thirst unquenched. The sea shapes every aspect of your life, its moods dictating your days. On calm days, the water is a mirror, reflecting the grey sky in a way that makes the world feel endless. You stand at the rail, watching the ripples spread, and for a moment, you can almost forget the hunger, the cold, the endless tasks. But calm seas are rare. More often, the wind howls, driving the ship forward with a force that makes the timbers groan. Waves slap against the hull, sending spray across the deck, and you learn to move with the ship's motion, your body swaying instinctively. At night, when the wind dies, the silence is almost worse. The ship drifts, its sails limp, and you feel the weight of the sea's vastness, its indifference pressing against you. Navigation is a skill you admire but cannot master. The navigator, a man with a face like weathered oak, carries tools you barely understand: a quadrant, a crude compass, a chart marked with lines that mean nothing to you. He reads the stars when they're visible, his voice low as he murmurs their names: Polaris, Arcturus, Vega. On clear nights, you watch him work, his hands steady despite the ship's sway, and you feel a flicker of hope. But clouds often hide the stars, and then the navigator relies on dead reckoning, guessing the ship's position based on speed and direction. It's an imprecise art, and you've heard tales of ships drifting far off course, their crews lost in the endless sea. The fear of being lost gnaws at you, a quiet dread that grows with every day without sight of land. Disease is a constant shadow, its presence felt in every cough, every fevered brow. Scurvy is the most insidious, creeping in after weeks without fresh food. Your gums ache, bleeding when you brush them with your finger, and your teeth feel loose, as if they might fall out with the next bite of hardtack. You've seen men weaken, their skin turning pale and blotchy, their eyes sinking into their skulls. The ship's surgeon, a dour man with stained hands, offers little help. His remedies herbal poultices, prayers to St. Rock are as likely to harm as to heal. You've learned to tend your own wounds, wrapping cuts in strips of cloth torn from your shirt. But the damp air slows healing, and infection is a constant threat. When a man dies, his body is wrapped in canvas and cast into the sea. A brief prayer spoken before the work resumes. The sea takes him, and you turn back to your tasks, the rhythm of the ship pulling you forward. Pirates are a fear that never fades. Their ships lurk on the horizon, their sails dark against the grey sky. You've heard stories of raids, entire crews slaughtered, their cargo stolen, their ship left to burn. The captain keeps a chest of weapons in his cabin: swords, daggers, a few crossbows, but you know they're no match for a determined attack. You skim the sea daily, your eyes straining for any sign of a sail. Even friendly ships can turn foe, their crews tempted by the promise of your cargo: spices from the east, wool from England, wine from Bordeaux. Trust is a rare thing, and you learn to keep your guard up, your hand never far from the knife at your belt. The isolation is perhaps the hardest part. Weeks at sea blur into a single, endless day, the grey sea unchanging, the faces around you growing gaunt and silent. Conversation fades, replaced by grunts and gestures. Men turn inward, their thoughts consumed by hunger, fear, or memories of home. You try to recall the warmth of a fire, the laughter of your family, but the sea erases such things. At night, you lie in the hold, listening to the creak of the hull and the lap of waves. Sometimes, you hear other sounds faint, unplaceable, like footsteps on the deck above or a voice calling from the fog. The older sailors warn you not to speak of them. The sea has its ghosts, they say, their eyes distant, and you learn to keep your fears to yourself. Yet there are moments of strange beauty. On rare nights when the sea is calm and the stars burn bright, you stand at the rail, watching the water glow with tiny sparks of light bioluminescence. The navigator calls it, though to you it's like stars fallen into the sea. The ship moves slowly, its sail catching the faint breeze, and for a moment, you feel a connection to something larger, something eternal. These moments are fleeting, but they sustain you, a reminder that even in this harsh world, there is wonder. You hold on to them, letting them anchor you against the hunger, the cold, the fear. The rhythm of the ship is relentless, but it is also comforting in its predictability. You haul ropes, scrub decks, mend sails, row oars. You endure because you must, because the sea offers no alternative. And yet, as you stand on the deck, the wind in your hair and the salt on your lips, you feel a strange kinship with the ship, with the sea, with the men around you. You are part of something larger, a fragile thread in the tapestry of the medieval world. Imagine yourself there, swaying with the ship, the horizon a distant promise, the sea whispering secrets you may never understand. As the days stretch on, you hear more stories, tales of ships that vanished, their crews lost to storm or sickness. Some say these ships still sail, their decks empty, their sails tattered, drifting through the fog like ghosts. The older sailors speak of one such ship, the Octavius, a name whispered with a shiver. They say it was found adrift, its crew frozen in time, a relic of a voyage gone terribly wrong. The tale is centuries old, its roots tangled in the fears of men like you, who live and die by the sea's whims. Let that story linger in your mind as we prepare to sail into its chilling details. A journey that carries us from the daily struggles of this ship to a vessel cursed to wander the frozen north. As you sway with the rhythm of the medieval merchant ship, the creak of its timbers and the sigh of the sea linger in your mind. The struggles of the sailor's hunger, cold, the ever-present threat of the unknown paint a vivid picture of life on the waves. But now, imagine the deck beneath you growing colder, the air sharper, the horizon no longer grey but white, fringed with ice. The sea, once restless, now glints with a brittle stillness, and the wind carries a chill that seeps into your bones. You are no longer on a bustling merchant corg, but aboard a different kind of vessel, one whose name has become a whisper among sailors, the Octavius. This is the story of a ship that sailed into legend, its crew frozen in a moment of time, its journey a haunting echo of the fears you felt in the dim hold of that merchant ship. Let the tale unfold slowly, like frost creeping across a window pane. As we drift into the icy waters of the far north, picture yourself in the year 1775, though the story begins earlier in the 1760s, when the Octavius first set sail. The ship was a merchant vessel not unlike the one you imagined earlier, built for trade, but drawn to a perilous ambition to navigate the Northwest Passage, a fabled route through the Arctic that promised a shortcut from Europe to Asia. The sea was no kinder then than it was in the Middle Ages, and the Arctic was a realm of its own, unforgiving, silent and cloaked in ice. The Octavius was sturdy, its hull reinforced to withstand the crush of floes, its crew hardened by years at sea. Yet no amount of preparation could shield them from what lay ahead. As you listen, imagine yourself standing on the deck of a whaling ship that would, centuries later, encounter the Octavius adrift, a ghost ship frozen in the vastness of the Arctic. The tale begins with the Octavius departing London in 1761, its holds laden with goods, perhaps wool, iron, or tools bound for the markets of China. The captain, a man of ambition, saw the Northwest Passage not just as a trade route but as a legacy. His name is lost to time, but his determination is etched into the story. The crew, some 40 souls, were a mix of seasoned sailors and young hands, their faces weathered by salt and wind. They knew the risks. The Arctic was a graveyard of ships, its waters choked with ice, its skies dark for months on end. Yet the promise of wealth and glory drove them forward, their sails catching the faint breeze as they sailed north, past the rugged coasts of Norway and into the unknown. Imagine the deck of the Octavius as it enters the Arctic. The air is sharp, slicing through your cloak like a blade. The sea is no longer a rolling expanse but a mosaic of ice and water, the floes grinding against the hull with a sound like distant thunder. The sails hang heavy, crusted with frost, and the ropes are stiff, difficult to grip with hands already numb. The crew works in silence, their breath steaming in the cold, their eyes scanning the horizon for a path through the ice. The sun, when it appears, is a pale disk, low and weak, offering little warmth. At night, the stars burn with a clarity that feels almost cruel, their light reflecting off the ice in a way that makes the world feel both vast and suffocating. The Octavius was not the first to attempt the Northwest Passage, nor would it be the last. In the centuries before medieval explorers nor sailors, perhaps, or early English adventurers had ventured into these waters, their sagas whispering of frozen seas and ships lost to the cold, the Octavius carried their legacy, a thread of ambition and hubris woven into the fabric of maritime history. The crew knew these stories, told in hushed tones around flickering lanterns. They spoke of ships trapped in ice, their crews starving or succumbing to the cold, their hulls crushed by the relentless pressure of the floes. Yet they pressed on, driven by the hope of success, their ship a fragile speck against the endless white. Life aboard the Octavius was a mirror of the merchant ship you imagined earlier, but harsher, colder, more isolated. The hold was cramped, the air thick with the scent of damp wool and tar. The crew slept in narrow hammocks, their bodies pressed close to conserve warmth. But the cold was relentless, seeping through the timbers and into their bones. Food was scarce hardtack, salted fish, a few barrels of pickled vegetables. Scurvy was a constant threat, its symptoms creeping in as the weeks stretched into months. The men's gums bled, their joints ached, and their strength waned. The captain rationed the food tightly, his voice steady, but his eyes betraying his own fear. Water was another challenge, the casks often frozen, forcing the crew to melt ice over a small fire. The process slow and laborious. The work was grueling. The crew hacked at the ice with axes, trying to clear a path for the ship, their hands blistered and bleeding. The cold made every task harder, the ropes brittle, the sails unyielding. When the wind died, the men took to the oars, their breath ragged as they pulled against the current. The ship moved slowly, its progress measured in inches, and the ice seemed to close in around them, a living thing that shifted and groaned. The sound was constant and low, grinding hum that filled the silence, punctuated by sharp cracks as the ice split. The crew worked in shifts, but rest was fleeting. Sleep brought no relief, only dreams of warmth and home, shattered by the cold reality of the ship. The isolation was profound. The Arctic was a world apart, its silence broken only by the wind and the ice. The crew spoke little, their voices hoarse from cold and exhaustion. They shared stories to pass the time, tales of home, of past voyages, of legends that felt too close to truth. They spoke of ghost ships, vessels seen adrift with no crew, their sails tattered, their decks empty. These stories were not new. In the Middle Ages, Norse sailors told of ships with red sails, gliding through the fog, their crews long dead. The Octavius's men knew these tales, and as the ice closed in, they began to wonder if they, too, would become part of the legend. The captain was a figure of authority, his cabin a small oasis of order in the chaos of the ship. He kept a log, his quill scratching across parchment by the light of a single candle. The log was a record of the voyage winds, currents, sightings of ice, but also a testament to his resolve. He wrote of the crew's struggles, of the cold that numbed their hands, of the hunger that weakened their bodies. Yet he wrote, too, of hope, of the passage that lay ahead, of the glory that awaited if they succeeded. The crew respected him, but they feared him, too, for his ambition drove them into waters few had survived. His cabin, lined with carved wood and hung with a single tapestry, was a stark contrast to the hold, where the men slept among barrels and rats. As the Octavius pushed deeper into the Arctic, the signs grew ominous. The ice thickened, the passages narrower. The crew saw strange things, shapes in the fog, lights that flickered and vanished, sounds like distant voices carried on the wind. Some said it was the sea playing tricks, others whispered of spirits, of the dead who sailed these waters. The navigator, a man of few words, grew tense, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He spoke of mirages, of the Fata Morgana, where the light bent to create visions of ships or land that weren't there. But the crew saw more than mirages. They saw sails in the distance, hulls that appeared and vanished, shadows that moved across the ice. The stories of ghost ships felt less like tales and more like warnings. The cold was the greatest enemy. It seeped into everything: the timbers, the sails, the men's bones. Frost formed on the deck, sparkling in the weak light, and the men wrapped themselves in every scrap of cloth they had. Their breath froze on their beards, their fingers grew numb, and their movements slowed. The captain ordered fires lit in iron braziers, but the wood was scarce, and the smoke stung their eyes. The men huddled around the flames, their faces gaunt, their eyes hollow. Some began to weaken, their bodies unable to fight the cold and hunger. Scurvy took its toll, and the first deaths came quietly, men slipping away in their hammocks, their bodies wrapped in canvas and cast into the sea. The Octavius was trapped, the ice closing around it like a fist. The crew worked tirelessly, hacking at the floes, but the ice was stronger, its weight pressing against the hull. The ship groaned, its timbers straining, and the men began to lose hope. The captain wrote in his log, his hand trembling, of the ice that held them, of the crew's fading strength, of the passage that seemed farther with every day. Yet he urged them on, his voice steady even as his eyes betrayed his doubt. The men followed because they had no choice, because the sea offered no mercy. Imagine yourself there, standing on the deck of the Octavius, the ice glinting around you, the air so cold it burns your lungs. The crew moves slowly, their faces pale, their hands wrapped in rags. The ship is a prison, its hull encased in ice, its sails useless. You hear the creak of the timbers, the grind of the ice, the faint whispers that seem to come from nowhere. The stories of ghost ships echo in your mind, tales of vessels lost to the sea, their crews doomed to sail forever. The Octavius feels like one of those ships, its fate uncertain, its journey a descent into the unknown. Let that image linger as we pause in the cold, quiet world of the Arctic, the Octavius a silent testament to the sea's power. You stand on the ice-bound deck of the Octavius, the air so cold it stings your skin. The horizon a blur of white where sea and sky merge. The ship is trapped, its hull gripped by the Arctic ice, its timbers groaning under the pressure. The crew, their faces gaunt and their breath steaming, move slowly, their strength sapped by hunger and cold. The tale of the Octavius lingers in your mind, a story that began in the 1760s but would echo through the centuries, carried on the whispers of sailors who feared the sea's secrets. As we continue, let the rhythm of this frozen world carry you, the steady creak of the ship and the distant howl of the wind guiding you deeper into the legend. Imagine yourself there wrapped in a tattered cloak, the ice glinting under a pale sun. As the Octavius becomes more than a ship, a spectral relic frozen in time, its story, a bridge between the medieval fears of the sea and the haunting discovery that would cement its place in maritime lore. The Octavius had been locked in the ice for weeks, perhaps months, by the time its fate was sealed. The crew, once 40 strong, had dwindled, their numbers reduced by scurvy, frostbite, and the relentless cold. The hold, once packed with trade goods, was now a hollow space, its barrels emptied, its sacks of grain gnawed by rats that had long since starved. The men slept in shifts, huddled together for warmth, their hammocks swaying with the faint motion of the ship as the ice shifted. The air below deck was thick, heavy with the scent of damp wood and unwashed bodies, and the dim light of a single lantern cast long shadows across the timbers. You can almost feel the weight of that air, the way it clings to your skin, the way the cold seeps into your bones despite the layers of wool and fur. The captain, a man whose ambition had driven the Octavius into these perilous waters, remained resolute, though his eyes betrayed his growing despair. His cabin, a small sanctuary at the stern, was lined with cracked wooden panels, their carvings worn smooth by years of salt and spray. A single candle burned on his desk, its flame flickering as he wrote in his log, the quill scratching across parchment that curled in the damp air. He recorded the ship's position, or what he could guess of it, the state of the crew, the dwindling supplies. His words were measured, but between the lines you could sense the strain, the fear that the Northwest Passage, once a dream of glory, had become a trap. The log was his anchor, a way to impose order on a world that was slipping into chaos. The crew's tasks grew harder as the ice tightened its grip. The men took turns hacking at the floes with axes, their hands wrapped in rags to protect against the cold. The blades dulled quickly, and the ice seemed to mock their efforts, closing in as soon as they cleared a path. The ship's hull groaned, the timbers creaking under the pressure, and every crack sent a shiver through the crew. They knew the stories of ships crushed by ice, their hulls splintered, their crews left to the mercy of the sea. The Octavius was sturdy, its oak timbers thick, and it seemed sealed with pitch, but it was no match for the Arctic's relentless power. The men worked until their strength gave out, their breaths short, their bodies trembling from cold and exhaustion. Food was nearly gone. The last of the hardtack had been rationed weeks ago, and the men chewed on scraps of leather or boiled rope ends in desperation. The captain ordered the remaining salted fish distributed, but it was barely enough to sustain them. Scurvy had taken hold, its symptoms unmistakable: swollen gums, loosened teeth, skin that bruised at the slightest touch. The men's faces grew pale, their eyes sunken, their movements slow and deliberate. The surgeon, a grizzled man with trembling hands, could do little. His herbs had run out, and his prayers to St. Rock, patron of the afflicted, went unanswered. The crew began to die, one by one, their bodies too weak to fight the cold and hunger. Each death was marked by a quiet ritual, a body wrapped in canvas, a prayer whispered, a splash as the sea claimed another soul. The isolation was crushing. The Arctic was a world of silence, broken only by the grind of ice and the howl of the wind. The crew spoke less and less, their voices hoarse, their thoughts turned inward. They shared stories when they could, tales of warmer seas, of ports where the air smelled of spices and flowers. But these stories felt distant, like memories of another life. The legends they told were darker, drawn from the medieval seas they had left behind. They spoke of ghost ships, vessels seen adrift with no crew, their sails tattered, their decks silent. These tales were old, rooted in the sagas of Norse sailors and the chronicles of Celtic monks, who spoke of ships that sailed into the fog and never returned. The Octavius's crew began to wonder if they, too, were becoming part of such a story, their ship destined to drift forever in the ice. The strange sights and sounds grew more frequent. On clear nights, when the aurora borealis painted the sky with ghostly light, the men saw shapes in the distant sails that appeared and vanished, hulls that glided across the ice without sound. Some said it was the Fata Morgana, a mirage that bent light to create visions of things that weren't there. Others whispered of spirits of the dead who sailed these waters, their ships cursed to wander. The navigator, his face lined with worry, spoke of bioluminescence, of the sea glowing with tiny sparks of light, but the crew saw more than that. They saw shadows moving across the ice, heard voices calling from the fog, felt the weight of eyes watching from the darkness. The Octavius was no longer just a ship, it was a haunted place. Its crew caught between life and death. The captain's log became a chronicle of despair. He wrote of the ice that held them, of the men who had fallen, of the strange sights that haunted the crew. His hand grew unsteady, the ink smudging as the cold numbed his fingers. Yet he wrote on as if the act of writing could keep the ship alive, could keep hope alive. He described the aurora, its colors dancing across the sky, and the ice, its surface glinting like polished glass. He wrote of the crew's courage, of their refusal to give up, even as their strength faded. But he wrote, too, of the fear that gripped them, of the whispers that seemed to come from the ship itself. The log was a testament to their struggle, a record that would outlast them all. The final days of the Octavius are shrouded in mystery, but the legend tells of a ship frozen in time. The ice closed in, sealing the ship in a grip that no axe could break. The crew, too weak to fight, succumbed one by one. Some died in their hammocks, their bodies curled against the cold. Others fell on the deck, their hands still clutching tools or ropes. The captain, ever defiant, remained at his desk, his quill in hand, his log open before him. The candle burned low, its flame flickering in the still air, and the ship grew silent, its creaks and groans fading as the ice took hold. The Octavius became a relic, a floating tomb, its crew preserved in the cold embrace of the Arctic. Centuries later, in 1775, a whaling ship, the Herald, would find the Octavius adrift west of Greenland. The tale, though rooted in the 18th century, carries the weight of medieval maritime lore, its details echoing the fears of sailors who braved the seas long before. The whalers approached cautiously, their ship cutting through the icy water, their lanterns casting a dim glow. The Octavius was a ghost, its sails tattered, its deck coated in frost. The boarding party found the crew frozen where they had fallen sailors in the hold, their hands clutching empty sacks, rowers at their benches, their faces etched with exhaustion. The captain at his desk, his quill still in hand, his log open to a final entry. The words were barely legible, smudged by cold and time, but they spoke of ice, of loss, of a voyage that had no end. The whalers took the log, their hands trembling as they read, but they left the ship untouched, unwilling to disturb the dead. The Octavius was left to drift, its fate unknown, its story carried back to the ports of Europe. Sailors retold the tale, embellishing it with each telling, until it became a legend, a warning of the sea's power, of the price of ambition, of the ghosts that linger in the fog. The Octavius was not just a ship, it was a symbol, a bridge between the medieval tales of spectral vessels and the fears of those who sailed in its wake. Its story resonated because it was not unique. The sea had claimed countless ships, their crews lost to cold, hunger, or the unknown, their hulls left to drift as silent witnesses. Imagine yourself aboard that whaling ship, the Herald, as it approaches the Octavius. The air is cold, the sea calm, the ice glinting under a pale moon. You stand at the rail, your breath steaming, your eyes fixed on the ghostly ship. The deck is silent, the crew hushed, their lanterns casting long shadows. You feel the weight of the story, the way it connects you to the sailors of centuries past, to the men who sailed into the unknown and never returned. The Octavius is a reminder of the sea's indifference, of the fragility of life, of the stories that linger long after the waves have closed over a ship's remains. As the Octavius fades into the fog, its sails barely visible, you feel the pull of other stories, older tales that shaped its legend. The medieval seas were alive with such stories whispered by Norse sailors and Celtic monks, tales of ships that sailed without crews, of captains cursed to wander forever. These stories were born in the fog of the North Atlantic, where the sea and sky blurred, and the line between reality and myth grew thin. Let the Octavius linger in your mind, its icy deck a silent testament, as we prepare to sail into those older tales, the myths that gave birth to the Flying Dutchman and the spectral fleets of the medieval seas. As the ghostly silhouette of the Octavius fades into the icy fog, its frozen crew a haunting echo of the sea's indifference. You feel the weight of its story settle around you, the creak of its timbers, the chill of its frost-covered deck, and the whispers of its lost sailors linger in your mind, connecting you to a deeper, older current of maritime lore. The medieval seas were alive with such tales, stories born in the mist where the horizon blurred and the line between the living and the dead grew thin. Imagine yourself now not aboard a ship, but standing on a windswept cliff overlooking the North Atlantic, the air heavy with salt and the faint tang of seaweed. The waves crash below, their rhythm steady and unhurried, and in the distance, a faint shape moves a ship, its sails glowing faintly, its hull vanishing into the haze. This is the world of medieval sea phantoms, the spectral fleets that haunted the imaginations of Norse sailors, Celtic monks, and Breton fishermen long before the legend of the Flying Dutchman took shape. Let these tales unfold slowly, like the tide creeping up the shore, their rhythm soothing as they carry you into the fog of history. The North Atlantic in the Middle Ages was a realm of mystery and fear. Its waters were vast, its storms fierce, and its shores jagged with rocks that could splinter a ship in moments. To the Norse who sailed these seas in their longships, the ocean was both a highway and a graveyard. Their sagas, carved in runes or whispered around fires, spoke of ships that sailed without crews, their sails red as blood, their masts glowing with an unearthly light. These were not mere stories but warnings, woven from the experiences of men who braved the sea's wrath. Imagine yourself in a Norse village, the air thick with the scent of pine and smoke, the longhouse warm against the chill of a winter night. The skald, a storyteller with a voice like the wind, speaks of a ship seen off the coast of Iceland, its deck empty, its oars moving as if pulled by unseen hands. The villagers listen, their eyes wide, knowing the sea's power to claim lives and leave only legends. These tales were not unique to the Norse. Across the Celtic lands, Ireland, Scotland, Brittany, monks and fishermen told similar stories. In the 7th century, Irish monks, known as peregrini, set sail in small boats called curraghs, seeking solitude and divine connection. Their chronicles, written in cramped script on vellum, spoke of ghostly fleets seen near the Hebrides, islands shrouded in mist where the sea and sky seemed to merge. One monk, his quilt trembling, described a ship with sails like moonlight, gliding silently past his boat. The crew, if there was one, was unseen, and the ship vanished into the fog, leaving only ripples on the water. These accounts, passed down through monasteries, were not meant to thrill but to warn, to remind sailors of the sea's mysteries and the fragility of life. The origins of these stories are rooted in the realities of medieval seafaring. The North Atlantic was treacherous, its currents unpredictable, its storms sudden and brutal. Ships, whether Norse longships or Celtic curraghs, were fragile against the sea's power. A sudden squall could capsize a boat, a hidden reef could tear its hull, and a cold could claim a crew in hours. Many ships simply vanished, their fates unknown, their wrecks swallowed by the waves. When survivors returned, they spoke of ships seen adrift, their sails tattered, their decks silent. These sightings, born of exhaustion, hunger, or the strange tricks of light on water, became the seeds of legend. The sea, vast and indifferent, was the perfect canvas for such stories, its mysteries giving rise to tales of the supernatural. Imagine yourself aboard one of these ships, a Norse longship perhaps, its dragon-headed prow cutting through the waves. The air is cold, the wind sharp, and the sea stretches endlessly before you. The sail, woven from wool and dyed with madder, flaps in the breeze, and the oars creak as the crew pulls in unison. You stand at the stern, your hands gripping the tiller, your eyes scanning the horizon. The sky is grey, the clouds low, and a faint mist curls over the water, blurring the line between sea and sky. In the distance, you see it a ship, its sails glowing faintly, its hull low in the water. It moves without sound, without purpose, and as you watch, it vanishes into the fog. Your heart quickens, but you say nothing, knowing the crew's superstitions. The sea has its secrets, and some are better left unspoken. These sightings were often explained by natural phenomena, though the explanations did little to ease the sailors' fears. The Fata Morgana, a mirage caused by the bending of light through layers of air, could create visions of ships or islands that weren't there. On calm days, when the sea was still, the horizon might shimmer, conjuring shapes that seemed to move and vanish. Bioluminescence, the glow of tiny organisms in the water, could make a ship's wake sparkle like stars, or its mast seem to glow with an eerie light. Scurvy, too, played a role, its effects clouding the mind, turning shadows into spectres. A sailor, weakened by hunger and illness, might see a distant wave as a ship, a cloud as a sail, a whisper of wind as a voice. These explanations, though rational, were cold comfort in the face of the sea's vastness, where every shadow held the promise of the unknown. The stories of ghost ships served a deeper purpose. They were not just tales of fear, but tools of meaning, ways to make sense of the sea's randomness. For medieval sailors, the ocean was a place of spiritual trial, a realm where the divine and the demonic met. The Norse believed in the Draugr, the restless dead who walked again, and some sagas spoke of Draugr ships, crewed by the fallen, sailing into the fog to haunt the living. Celtic monks saw these visions as signs of divine judgment, warnings to live a virtuous life. The tales were a form of social control, urging sailors to respect the sea, to honor their gods, to cling to hope even in despair. They were also a way to cope with loss, to give shape to the grief of those whose loved ones never returned. Imagine yourself in a Breton fishing village, the air thick with the scent of salt and fish, the harbor lined with small boats bobbing in the tide. An old fisherman, his hands gnarled from years of hauling nets, tells a story by the fire. He speaks of a ship seen off the coast, its sails red as blood, its masts glowing in the dark. The villagers nod, their faces solemn, for they know the tale. It is an old one, older than the fisherman's grandfather, older than the stones of the church. It is the story of a captain cursed to sail forever, his ship doomed to wander the seas. The villagers call it the red-sailed ship, but centuries later, it would become known as the Flying Dutchman, its legend shaped by the fears and hopes of those who sailed the North Atlantic. The Flying Dutchman, though named in the 17th century, has roots in these medieval tales. The motif of a cursed captain, condemned to sail until Judgment Day, appears in 13th and 14th century stories long before the Dutch East India Company rose to power. One such tale, recorded in a Norse saga, speaks of a chieftain who defied the gods, sailing into a storm to prove his strength. The gods, angered, cursed him to sail forever, his ship a shadow in the fog. Another story from a Breton chronicle tells of a captain who betrayed his crew, abandoning them to a storm. His punishment was eternal wandering, his ship seen by fishermen on moonless nights. These stories, though varied, share a common thread: a captain's hubris, a divine curse, a ship that defies the natural order. The purpose of these tales was not just to warn but to comfort. The sea was unpredictable, its dangers beyond human control. A storm could sink a ship, a current could carry it off course, a crew could vanish without a trace. The stories of ghost ships gave meaning to these losses, turning random tragedy into a narrative of purpose. They reminded sailors that their lives, though fragile, were part of a larger story, one that connected them to their ancestors, to their gods, to the sea itself. The tales were a lullaby of sorts, a way to soothe the fears of those who ventured into the unknown, their rhythm as steady as the waves. Imagine yourself now, standing on the deck of a medieval ship, the fog thick around you, the sea a mirror of grey. The air is heavy, the wind a faint whisper, and a crew is silent, their eyes fixed on the horizon. You hear a sound, a low creak, like wood bending under strain, but the ship is still. In the distance, a shape emerges, its sails faintly glowing, its hull low and dark. It moves without sound, gliding through the fog, and then it is gone, leaving only ripples in its wake. The crew says nothing, but their hands tighten on their oars, their prayers whisper to the saints or the old gods. The sea has its secrets, and you feel them now, their weight settling around you like a cloak. These medieval tales of sea phantoms are the ancestors of the Flying Dutchman, their roots deep in the fears and hopes of those who sailed the North Atlantic. They speak of a time when the sea was both a path and a peril, a place where the living and the dead seemed to meet. As you linger in this foggy world, let the rhythm of these stories carry you, their steady cadence a reminder of the sea's eternal presence. The tales of ghost ships are not just stories of loss but of memory, of lives lived and lost, of ships that sail forever in the fog. And as we drift from these ancient myths, we turn to another truth of the sea, the stark divide between those who ruled and those who toiled. A divide that lingered even in death aboard ships where silk and shackles told a story of their own. The fog of the North Atlantic clings to you, its damp chill seeping into your bones as you stand on the imagined deck of a medieval ship, the creak of its timbers blending with the lap of waves. The tales of ghostly ships, red-sailed vessels, glowing masts, silent hulls gliding through the mist linger in your mind, their rhythm as steady and soothing as the tide. These stories born from the fears and hopes of Norse sailors, Celtic monks, and Breton fishermen are the roots of the Flying Dutchman, a legend that would grow in later centuries but was already taking shape in the medieval seas. As we continue, let the rhythm of these tales carry you deeper into the past, where the sea was a place of mystery, its phantoms a reflection of the lives and losses of those who sailed it. Imagine yourself now not on a ship but in a quiet coastal village, the air thick with the scent of salt and wood smoke as the stories of sea phantoms unfold, their cadence lulling you toward rest. The medieval North Atlantic was a world apart, its waters vast and unpredictable, its shores fringed with cliffs and jagged rocks. For those who sailed it, whether Norse traders in their sleek longships, Celtic monks in their fragile curraghs, or Breton fishermen in their sturdy boats, the sea was both a path to survival and a source of dread. The stories they told were not mere fancies but anchors, ways to make sense of a world where a single storm could erase a crew, where a ship could vanish without a trace. These tales of ghostly ships, seen adrift in the fog or glowing under a moonless sky, were woven into the fabric of their lives, passed down through generations in sagas, chronicles, and fireside whispers. As you listen, picture yourself seated by a hearth in a Norse longhouse. The fire casting shadows on the walls, the Skald's voice low and steady as he speaks of a ship that sails forever, its crew lost to the sea's embrace. The Norse sagas, etched in runes on stone or wood, are rich with such stories. One tale from the 12th century speaks of a ship seen off the coast of Greenland, its sails tattered but glowing faintly, as if lit by an inner fire. The crew, if there was one, was unseen, and a ship moved against the wind, its path unnatural. The saga tells of a warrior who saw it, his hands trembling as he gripped his oar, his prayers to Thor and Odin unanswered. The ship vanished into the fog, leaving only a ripple on the water. But the warrior carried the story back to his village, where it was told and retold, a warning of the sea's mysteries. These stories were not meant to thrill, but to teach, to remind sailors of the forces beyond their control, of the thin line between life and the eternal wanderings of the dead. In the Celtic world, the tales were no less vivid. Irish monks, sailing in their curragh small boats of wood and hide, recorded their voyages in chronicles that blended faith and fear. One such account from the 9th century describes a fleet of ships seen near the Hebrides, their sails pale as moonlight, their hulls gliding without sound. The monk, his quill scratching across vellum in a damp monastery, wrote of the sight with awe and dread, believing it a sign of divine judgment. The ships, he said, were crewed by the souls of the lost, those who had died at sea without the church's rites. The tale was copied and shared, carried across the Celtic lands, where it joined the oral traditions of fishermen and traders. These stories, like the Norse sagas, were a way to give shape to the sea's randomness, to find solace in the face of loss. The Breton coast, with its jagged cliffs and fog-shrouded harbours, was another cradle for these tales. Fishermen, their hands calloused from hauling nets, spoke of ships seen in the mist, their masts glowing with a strange light, their decks empty. One story, told in a 13th century village, described a captain cursed for his greed, abandoning his crew to a storm to save his cargo. The gods, or perhaps the Christian God, as the tale was retold, condemned him to sail forever, his ship a shadow in the fog. The villagers called it the red-sailed ship, its hue a mark of blood and shame. This story, like others, was a precursor to the Flying Dutchman, its details shifting with each telling, but its core unchanged and true. These tales were not just stories, but reflections of the sailors' lives. The sea was a place of constant struggle, where every voyage was a gamble against the elements. Storms could arise without warning, their winds tearing sails and snapping masts. Currents could carry a ship off course, leaving it adrift in waters where no land was in sight. Hunger, cold, and disease were constant companions, and many crews never returned, their ships lost to the depths. When survivors spoke of ghostly ships, their accounts were shaped by these realities, by exhaustion, by scurvy's hallucinations, by the strange play of light on water. The Fata Morgana, a mirage that conjured visions of ships or islands, was a common explanation, its shimmering images haunting the minds of weary sailors. Bioluminescence, the sea's glow, could make a ship's wake sparkle, or its masts seem to burn with an eerie light. These phenomena, though natural, were woven into the stories, their mystery fueling the belief in spectral fleets. Imagine yourself now standing on the deck of a Breton fishing boat, the air heavy with mist, the sea a grey mirror beneath you. The wind is faint, the sails limp, and the crew is silent, their eyes scanning the horizon. You hear a sound, a low creak, like wood under strain, but your ship is still. In the distance, a shape emerges, its sails glowing faintly, its hull dark and low. It moves without sound, gliding through the fog, and then it is gone, leaving only a ripple on the water. The crew whispers prayers to St. and patron of sailors, their hands tightening on their nets. You feel the weight of the sight, the way it stirs memories of stories told in the village, of ships that sail without crews, of captains cursed to wander. The sea has its secrets, and you sense them now, their presence as real as the salt on your lips. The purpose of these stories was manifold. They were warnings, urging sailors to respect the sea's power, to honor their gods, to prepare for the dangers that awaited. They were also a form of social control, reinforcing the values of loyalty, courage, and faith. A captain who betrayed his crew, as in the Breton tale, was a lesson in duty, his curse a reminder of the consequences of selfishness. The stories were also a way to cope with grief, to give meaning to the loss of those who never returned. When a ship vanished, its crew became part of the legend, their names preserved in tales of ghostly fleets. These stories were a lullaby for the soul, their rhythm soothing the fears of those who faced the sea's uncertainty, their words a bridge between the living and the lost. The medieval sea phantoms were not just tales of fear, but of connection. They linked sailors to their ancestors, to the Norse who sailed before them, to the monks who sought God in the waves, to the fishermen who braved the fog. The stories were a reminder that the sea was eternal, its rhythms unchanging, its mysteries enduring. They spoke of a world where the line between life and death was blurred, where the fog could hide a ship or reveal a phantom. The tales were a way to honor the dead, to keep their memory alive, to make sense of a world where loss was as constant as the tide. As you listen, imagine yourself in that Breton village, the fire warm against the chill, the fisherman's voice steady as he tells of the red-sailed ship, its masts glowing in the dark, its captain doomed to sail forever. These stories, though rooted in the Middle Ages, carried forward, their details shifting but their essence unchanged. By the 17th century, they would coalesce into the legend of the Flying Dutchman, a name that evoked the same fears and hopes. The cursed captain, the eternal voyage, the ship that appeared and vanished. These were not new ideas but echoes of the medieval tales, their roots deep in the fog of the North Atlantic. The stories were a testament to the sea's power, to its ability to shape lives and legends, to carry ships and souls into the unknown. They were a reminder that the sea was both a path and a peril, a place where the living and the dead seemed to meet, their stories intertwined in the mist. As you linger in this world of fog and shadow, let the rhythm of these tales carry you. The sea is vast, its secrets many, its stories a steady cadence that soothes even as it haunts. The ghostly ships, with their glowing masts and silent decks, are more than legends, they are memories, preserved in the words of those who sailed and those who waited. They are a bridge to the past, a link to the sailors who faced the sea's wrath, to the monks who saw divine signs in the waves, to the fishermen who whispered of phantoms by the fire. And as we drift from these tales, we turn to another truth of the sea, the stark divide between those who ruled and those who toiled, a divide that lingered even in death aboard ships, where the contrast between silk and shackles told a story of its own. As the fog of the North Atlantic fades, carrying with it the ghostly tales of red-sailed ships and cursed captains, you find yourself drawn to another truth of the medieval seas, a truth not of fountains, but of human lives divided by stark lines of power and powerlessness. The rhythm of the waves remains steady and unhurried, a reminder of the sea's indifference to the stories it carries. Imagine yourself now standing on the deck of a merchant ship, not unlike the Octavius or the spectral vessels of Norse and Celtic lore, but one where the living and the dead share a different kind of haunting. The air is thick with the scent of salt and tar, the deck creaks beneath your feet, and the horizon stretches endlessly, a grey veil hiding both hope and peril. This ship, like many of its time, is a microcosm of the medieval world, where the powerful and the powerless sail together, their fates intertwined yet worlds apart. Let this story unfold slowly, its cadence soothing as it carries you into the lives of those who sailed, some in silk, others in shackles, and the ghostly ships that bore witness to their divide, even in death. The medieval seas were not just a stage for trade and exploration, but a mirror of society. Hierarchies on merchant ships crossing the Mediterranean, the North Sea, or the Atlantic. The deck was a place of stark contrast. Above, the captain and his officers stood, their cloaks of fine wool or fur fluttering in the wind, their voices carrying the weight of command. Below, in the dark hold, toiled the sailors, the rowers, and on many vessels, the enslaved men and women bound by chains, their lives defined by labor and confinement. These ships, when found adrift as ghostly relics, preserved this divide. Their decks are frozen to blow of silk and shackles, a haunting reminder of the inequalities that persisted even in the face of the CS Impartial. Picture yourself on such a ship, a merchant galley sailing from Venice to Alexandria in the 14th century. The vessel is long and narrow, its hull painted with stripes of red and black, its deck crowded with barrels of wine, bales of silk, and crates of spices. The sails catch the warm Mediterranean breeze, but the oars below drive the ship forward, their rhythm a steady drumbeat echoing through the hold. You stand on the upper deck, near the captain's cabin where the air is fresher, tinged with the scent of citrus from a crate of oranges bound for market. The captain, a man of wealth and status, moves with purpose, his boots polished, his cloak trimmed with fox fur. His cabin is a small haven, its walls lined with carved wood, its table set with a silver goblet and a map weighted with polished stones. He writes in his log, his quill scratching steadily, recording the ship's progress, the cargo's value, the crew's obedience. Below deck, the world is different. The hold is a maze of shadows, the air thick with the smell of sweat, damp wood, and the faint metallic tang of rusted iron. Here, the rowers sit, their backs bent, their hands gripping oars worn smooth by years of use. Many are enslaved, their ankles bound by chains that clank with every stroke. Their clothes are tattered, their faces gaunt from hunger and exhaustion. The hold is cramped, the ceiling low, and the only light comes from narrow slits in the hull, casting faint beams across the wooden benches. You can almost feel the weight of the air, the way it presses against your chest, the way the heat and damp cling to your skin. The rowers move in unison, their bodies swaying with the rhythm of the drum, their breaths ragged but steady. They do not speak, for speech is a luxury they cannot afford. The contrast between the upper deck and the hold is stark, a reflection of the medieval world's rigid divisions. The captain and his officers, often merchants or minor nobles, live in relative comfort. Their meals, though simple by land standards, are a feast compared to the rowers' rations: dried figs, salted fish, wine diluted with water. They sleep in narrow bunks, their blankets coarse but dry, their cabins shielded from the worst of the sea spray. The rowers, by contrast, sleep where they sit, their bodies slumped over their oars, their chains preventing escape even in rest. Their food is hardtack, often crawling, weevils and water from casks that taste of algae and wood. Hunger is a constant companion, its ache a dull rhythm that matches the beat of the drum. The work aboard the galley is relentless. On the upper deck, the sailors free men, though pull haul ropes, mend sails and scrub the planks, their hands blistered from the coarse hemp and the salt that stings their cuts. They are not chained, but their lives are bound by necessity, their wages barely enough to survive. Below, the rowers toil without respite, their muscles straining, their backs aching from the unnatural posture. The drum sets the pace, its beat a relentless command, and the overseer, a man with a whip coiled at his belt, ensures compliance. The whip is rarely used, for the rowers know their place, but its presence is a constant threat, a reminder of the power that divides the ship. Disease is a spectre that haunts both decks, though it strikes the hold hardest. Scurvy creeps in after weeks at sea. Its symptoms: cruel swollen gums, loosened teeth, skin that bruises at the slightest touch. The rowers, weakened by hunger and confinement, fall first, their bodies wasting away in the damp heat. The ship's surgeon, if there is one, is little help, his remedies limited to prayers and crude poultices. On the upper deck, the captain and his officers fare better. Their access to dried fruit is shield against scurvy, but they, too, feel the sea's toll. Fevers spread quickly in the close quarters, and a simple cut can fester, turning deadly in the salt air. When a man dies, whether sailor or rower, his body is wrapped in canvas and cast into the sea, a brief prayer spoken before the work resumes. The sea takes all, indifferent to rank or status. The ship's cargo tells its own story of wealth and power. The barrels of wine, the bales of silk, the crates of spices, these are the treasures of the medieval world, bound for markets in distant ports. The captain guards them fiercely, his wealth tied to their safe delivery. But the human cargo, the enslaved men and women in the hold, is just as valuable. In the 14th century, merchant ships from Venice, Genoa, and Portugal often carried enslaved people captives from wars, raids, or distant lands across the Mediterranean and later the Atlantic. They were rowers, laborers, or servants, their lives reduced to a line in the captain's ledger. Their presence was a grim reality, their chains a constant reminder of the divide between those who commanded and those who served. Imagine yourself now standing in the captain's cabin, the air warm with the scent of wax and ink. The table is set with a pewter plate, a goblet, a loaf of bread still soft from a recent port. The captain writes, his quill steady, his face lined with the strain of command. Outside, the sea is calm, its surface glinting under a pale sun. But the calm is deceptive. You step onto the deck, the wind carrying the faint cries of gulls, and you feel the ship's rhythm. The creak of its timbers, the thud of the drum below. You descend to the hold, the air growing heavier, the light dimmer. The rowers are there, their faces shadowed, their chains clinking with each stroke. You see the contrast, the silk of the captain's cloak against the shackles that bind the rowers. And you understand the ship's truth, a world divided, even at sea. The stories of ghost ships, so vivid in the medieval imagination, often carried this truth. When ships were found adrift, their crews lost to storm, disease, or rebellion. The scene was a frozen mirror of this divide. The captain might be found in his cabin, his body preserved by the cold, his quill still in hand, his goblet nearby. The officers, dressed in wool and fur, might lie on the deck, their swords at their sides. Below, in the hold, the rowers remained, their bodies entangled with chains, their faces etched with the exhaustion of their final moments. These ships, when discovered, were not just relics of tragedy, but of inequality. Their decks a testament to the lives that sailed together yet apart. The sea, indifferent and eternal, carried these ships forward, their stories whispered by those who found them. In the 14th century, chronicles from Venice and Portugal spoke of such vessels, their holds filled with the dead, their decks silent but for the creak of wood and the lap of waves. One account, from a Genoese merchant, described a galley found adrift off the coast of Crete, its captain seated at his desk, his log open, his officers sprawled nearby. Below, the rowers were chained to their benches, their bodies skeletal, their eyes staring into nothingness. The merchant took what cargo he could but left the ship to drift, unwilling to disturb its ghostly crew. The tale spread, carried to ports across the Mediterranean, a warning of the sea's power and the divides it could not erase. Imagine yourself aboard such a ship, found adrift by a passing vessel. The air is cold, the deck slick with frost, the sails tattered and limp. You step into the captain's cabin, the air heavy with the scent of damp wood and wax. The captain is there, his body stiff, his quill still clutched in his hand, his log open to a final entry. You descend to the hold, the light dim, the air thick with decay. The rowers are there, their chains rusted, their bodies hunched in death as they were in life. The contrast is stark, the silk of the captain's cloak a cruel counterpoint to the shackles that bind the rowers. The ship is a ghost, its crew silent, its story a haunting reminder of the lives it carried. These ghostly ships were more than relics of tragedy, they were mirrors of the medieval world, where power and powerlessness sailed side by side. The sea, vast and unyielding, cared nothing for rank or status, yet the ships it claimed preserved the divides of the living. The captain's wealth, the rowers' chains, the cargo's valuable were frozen in time, a testament to the inequalities that shaped the medieval seas. As you linger in this world, let the rhythm of the ship carry you, its creak and sway a steady lullaby. The stories of silk and shackles are not just tales of loss, but of memory of lives lived, and lost of ships that sailed into legend, their decks a silent witness to the divide between those who ruled and those who toiled. The rhythm of the sea continues to sway you, its steady pulse a reminder of the vast, indifferent waters that carried the medieval world's hopes and burdens. You stand on the deck of a merchant galley, its timbers creaking beneath your feet, the air thick with the scent of salt and damp wood, the ghostly ships of the North Atlantic with their glowing sails, and silent crews linger in your mind. But now the story shifts to a different kind of haunting, not of specters, but of the human divides that persisted even in death. the contrast between silk and shackles, between the captain's fine cabin and the chained rowers below, tells a story as old as the sea itself. Imagine yourself now descending into the hold of this ship, the light dim, the air heavy, the clank of chains mingling with the lap of waves. Let this tale unfold slowly, its cadence soothing and unhurried, as we explore the lives of those who sailed together yet apart, their stories preserved in the ghostly relics of ships found adrift, where the powerful and the powerless remain divided even in the sea's eternal embrace. The merchant galley, sailing across the Mediterranean or the Atlantic in the 14th or 15th century, was a world of stark contrasts. On the upper deck, the captain and his officers moved with authority, their cloaks of wool or velvet catching the breeze, their boots polished despite the salt that crusted everything. The captain's cabin was a small fortress of privilege, its walls lined with carved panels, its table set with pewter plates and a jug of wine. A lantern hung from a beam, casting a warm glow over charts and ledgers, where the captain recorded the voyage's progress and the cargo's worth. The officers, often merchants or younger sons of minor nobles, shared in this relative comfort. Their bunks padded with straw, their meals supplemented with dried fruit or salted meat. Their world was one of command, their lives tied to the success of the voyage, their status a shield against the sea's hardships. Below deck, the hold was a different reality. The air was thick, heavy with the smell of sweat, tar, and the faint decay of spoiled provisions. The rowers, many of them enslaved or indentured, sat chained to their benches, their hands gripping oars worn smooth by countless voyages. Their clothes were rags, their bodies gaunt from hunger and exhaustion, their ankles bound by iron shackles that left raw, red marks. The hold was cramped, the ceiling low, and the only light came from narrow slits in the hull, casting faint beams across the damp wood. The rowers moved in unison, their bodies swaying to the beat of a drum, their breaths ragged but steady. The overseer, a man with a coiled whip and a voice like gravel, stood watch, his presence a constant reminder of their place. The rhythm of the oars was relentless, a cadence that shaped their days and nights, a rhythm that lulled them into a state of endurance, if not acceptance. The work in the hold was grueling. The rowers pulled for hours, their muscles straining, their backs aching from the unnatural posture. The oars were heavy, they would splintered, and the effort required to keep the ship moving was immense. Sweat dripped from their brows, mixing with the salt that clung to their skin, and the air grew stifling, the heat trapped by the low ceiling. The sailors on the upper deck, though free, faced their own labors hauling ropes, mending sails, scrubbing the planks, but their work was lighter, their freedom a privilege the rowers could only dream of. The sailors ate the same hardtack, drank the same brackish water, but they could move freely. Feel the wind on their faces, see the horizon. The rowers, chained to their benches, knew only the darkness of the hold, the clank of their chains, the endless rhythm of the drum. Food was a constant divide. The captain and officers ate sparingly, but better bread that was still soft, dried figs, a sip of wine to warm their bones. The rowers and sailors made do with hardtack, its surface crawling with weevils, and water that tasted of wood and algae. On good days, there might be a scrap of salted fish, but it was never enough. Hunger was a quiet companion, its ache a steady rhythm that matched the oars. The rowers, weakened by hunger, grew gaunt, their faces hollow, their eyes dull. Scurvy crept in, its symptoms cruel gums that bled, teeth that loosened, skin that bruised at the slightest touch. The captain, with access to the ship's small store of fruit, was spared, but the rowers suffered, their bodies wasting away in the damp, dark hold. Disease was a spectre that haunted every deck, but it struck the hold hardest. Fevers spread quickly in the close quarters, carried by the air or the water. A cough could become a death sentence, a cut could fester into infection. The ship's surgeon, if there was one, was little help, his tools rusted, his knowledge limited to bleeding and prayer. The rowers, confined and weakened, fell first, their bodies too frail to fight the illness. When a man died, his body was unchained, wrapped in canvas and cast into the sea. A brief prayer spoken before the drum resumed its beat. The sailors on the upper deck, though not immune, had a better chance. Their access to fresh air and better food a thin shield against the sea's toll. But death was impartial and the sea took all, regardless of rank. The cargo aboard these ships was a testament to the medieval world's wealth and ambition. Barrels of wine from Bordeaux, bales of silk from Venice, crates of spices from the east, these were the treasures that drove men to sea. But the human cargo was just as vital. Enslaved men and women, captured in wars or raids, were a common sight on merchant ships, their labor powering the galleys, their lives a line in the captain's ledger. In the 14th and 15th centuries, ports like Lisbon, Venice, and Genoa thrived on this trade. Their ships carrying enslaved people across the Mediterranean and, later, the Atlantic. The rowers were often from distant lands, Africa, the Balkans, the Levant, their languages and cultures as varied as the cargo they helped transport. Their chains were a constant reminder of their status, their lives bound to the ship's purpose. The ghostly ships of medieval lore often preserved this divide. When a ship was found adrift, its crew lost to storm, disease, or rebellion. The scene was a frozen reflection of the living world. The captain might be found in his cabin, his body stiff, his quill still in hand, his silver goblet overturned. The officers, dressed in wool and fur, might lie on the deck, their swords nearby, their faces etched with the strain of their final moments. Below, in the hold, the rowers remained, their bodies entangled with chains, their hands still clutching oars. The contrast was stark, a haunting tableau of silk and shackles, a reminder that even in death, the divides of life persisted. Chronicles from the period Portuguese, Venetian, Spanish describe such ships, their holds filled with the dead, their decks silent but for the creak of wood and the lap of waves. Imagine yourself aboard one of these ghostly ships, found adrift by a passing vessel. The air is cold, the deck slick with frost, the sails tattered and limp. You step into the captain's cabin, the air heavy with the scent of wax and decay. The captain is there, seated at his desk, his cloak of fine wool draped over his shoulders, his log open to a final entry. The words are smudged, but they speak of a storm, of a crew weakened by hunger, of a voyage that went astray. You descend to the hold, the light dim, the air thick with the smell of damp wood and iron. The rowers are there, their bodies hunched, their chains rusted, their faces frozen in exhaustion. The contrast is undeniable, the captain's silk against the rowers' shackles, the wealth above against the suffering below. The timed ship is a ghost, its crew silent, its story a testament to the divides that shaped it. These ghostly ships were more than relics of tragedy, they were mirrors of the medieval world's inequalities. The sea, vast and indifferent, cared nothing for rank or status, yet the ships it claimed preserved the divides of the living. The captain's wealth, the rowers' chains, the cargo's value all were frozen in time, a testament to the hierarchies that defined the medieval seas. The stories of these ships, whispered in ports from Lisbon to Constantinople, were warnings, not just of the sea's power, but of the human cost of ambition. They spoke of lives lived and lost, of men and women who sailed together yet apart, their fates bound by the same ship but divided by the weight of silk and shackles. The chronicles of the time tell of such ships, found adrift off the coasts of Morocco, Spain, or Greece. One account, from a Portuguese merchant in the 15th century, describes a galley discovered near the Azores, its deck empty, its hold a tomb. The captain was found in his cabin, his quill still in hand, his log detailing a plague that swept through the crew. Below, the rowers were chained to their benches, their bodies skeletal, their eyes staring into nothingness. The merchant took what cargo he could, spices, silk, a few barrels of wine, but left the ship to drift, unwilling to disturb its ghostly crew. The tale spread, carried to ports across the Atlantic, a reminder of the sea's indifference and the divides it could not erase. Imagine yourself now, standing on the shore of a quiet harbor, the air thick with the scent of salt and seaweed, the waves lapping at the rocks. In the distance, a ship drifts, its sails tattered, its deck silent. You know its story, the contrast between the captain's cabin and the rower's hold, the silk and shackles that defined its world. The sea has claimed it, as it claims all things, but its story lingers, a haunting reminder of the lives it carried. The rhythm of the waves carries you, its steady cadence a lullaby for the soul, And as you listen, you feel the weight of those lives, the powerful and the powerless, bound together by the sea's eternal embrace. As we linger in this world of silk and shackles, the ghostly ships of the medieval seas fade into the mist, their stories a bridge to the past. They speak of a time when the sea was both a path and a peril, a place where the divides of life were preserved even in death. Let this rhythm carry you now as we prepare to draw this journey to a close, reflecting on the lives that sailed these waters, the stories that shaped their legends, and the quiet comfort of the present where the sea's secrets remain, whispering softly as you drift toward rest. As the ghostly silhouette of the merchant galley fades into the mist, its deck silent but for the creak of timbers and the whisper of waves, you feel the weight of the sea stories settle gently around you. The medieval seas, vast and unyielding, have carried us through a journey of hardship, mystery, and haunting truths. From the damp, cramped hold of a merchant ship where sailors toiled against hunger, and cold to the frozen deck of the Octavius, its crew preserved in a moment of eternal stillness, we've sailed through the rhythm of lives bound by the sea's indifference. The tales of spectral ships glowing in the fog spoke of fears and hopes woven into the fabric of medieval lore, while the stark divide between silk and shackles revealed a world where power and powerlessness sailed side by side, their stories preserved in the ghostly relics found adrift. Let this rhythm linger now, its cadence as steady as the tide, as we draw this journey to a close, easing you toward rest with a reflection on the past and the quiet comfort of the present. Imagine yourself now, no longer on the windswept deck of a medieval ship, but standing on a quiet shore, the air soft with the scent of salt and seaweed. The sea stretches before you, its surface calm, its waves lapping gently at the rocks. The stories of the ghost ships, the cursed voyages, and the lives divided by silk and shackles feel distant, yet their echoes remain, like ripples spreading across the water. These tales, born in the fog of the Middle Ages, were more than warnings or legends. They were a way to make sense of a world where the sea was both a path and a peril, a place where the living and the dead seemed to meet. The sailors who faced the storms, the rowers who pulled in chains, the captains who wrote their final logs, they were all part of this world, their lives woven into the rhythm of the sea, their stories carried forward by those who followed. The medieval seas were a place of struggle, but they were also a place of connection. The tales of ghost ships linked sailors to their ancestors, to the Norse who carved their sagas in runes, to the monks who saw divine signs in the waves, to the fishermen who whispered of phantoms by the fire. These stories were a lullaby for the soul, their steady cadence soothing the fears of those who braved the unknown. They reminded sailors that their lives, though fragile, were part of something larger, something eternal. The sea, indifferent and vast, was a canvas for these stories, its mysteries giving rise to legends that lingered long after the waves had closed over a ship's remains. Now, as you stand on this imagined shore, the sea before you is calm, its surface reflecting the soft light of a fading sky. The hardships of the medieval sailors, the hunger, the cold, the chains are far removed from the comfort of your present moment. You are safe, warm, wrapped in the quiet of your own space. The sea's dangers a distant memory, yet the stories we've explored tonight connect you to those who came before. There lives a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, their legends a reminder of the sea's enduring power. Let these stories settle around you, their rhythm a gentle tide that carries you toward rest, their whispers a soft invitation to close your eyes and drift. The ghost ships of the medieval seas sail on in memory, their sails tattered, their decks silent, their stories preserved in the fog of history. They are a reminder that the past is never truly gone, its echoes carried in the tales we tell, the lessons we learn, the quiet moments we share. As you listen to the waves, imagine them carrying these stories forward, linking you to the sailors, the rowers, the captains who faced the sea's wrath. Their lives, though marked by struggle, were part of the same rhythm that carries you now, a rhythm that soothes and comforts, a rhythm that invites you to let go. If these tales of the sea have lulled you, if the rhythm of history has brought you calm, we invite you to join us again. Subscribe to Boring History for Sleep on YouTube, where more stories await. each crafted to carry you gently into the past, to soothe your mind, and to ease you toward rest. By subscribing, you'll ensure that these journeys are always within reach, ready to guide you through the quiet corners of history whenever you need them. Click the button, join our community, and let the sea stories carry you night after night, their rhythm a steady companion as you drift towards sleep. For now, let the waves fade, their sounds softening into silence. The sea's calm, the horizon clear, and the stories of the ghost ships rest quietly in the fog. Breathe deeply, let your thoughts wander, and allow the rhythm of the past to carry you into a peaceful, gentle slumber. Good night, and may the sea's whispers guide you softly until we meet again.